There's a $4 bottle sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now that does something to Grubs a $42 bag of Scott's Grub eggs can only dream of doing. And almost nobody outside the pest control industry knows this trick even exists. I'm going to show you exactly what it is, how to use it correctly, and just as important, when this cheap trick isn't enough and you actually need to bring in the heavier stuff. My name's Lenny. I've spent the last 20 years walking lawns for a living. And grub season is the one time of year homeowners spend the most money on the least effective products. So let's fix that today. First, let's talk about what's actually happening under your lawn right now, because most people don't understand the timeline, and that's exactly why they get caught off guard every single year. Japanese beetle grubs are small white C-shaped larvae, and they spend their whole life underground eating grass roots from below. The eggs hatch once soil temperature at about 6 inches down, hold steady around 70 degrees, which lands in most of the country somewhere in that late June to early July window. A normal suburban yard, something in the 7,000 to 8,000 square foot range, can hatch anywhere from 20,000 to well over 100,000 of these things in a 2-week span, and you won't see any of it happening because it's 4 inches under the soil surface, completely invisible from where you're standing on your porch. The first sign most homeowners actually notice isn't the grubs themselves. It's the skunks and raccoons tearing up the yard at night hunting for a meal. And by the time that's happening, the grubs have already been feeding on your root system for weeks. So the real question isn't whether you have grubs. In most parts of the country, if you have a lawn, you have grubs. The real question is how many, and whether that number crosses the threshold where they actually start doing visible damage. Here's the $4 trick, and I want you to understand exactly why it works before I give you the how-to, because using it wrong wastes your time and gives you a false result. Mix a tablespoon or 2 of plain dish soap, the original Blue Dawn works fine, into 2 gallons of water in a watering can. Pick a 1 square yard section of lawn, ideally somewhere you suspect grub activity, like a spot that's gone a little spongy or soft underfoot. Pour the soap solution slowly and evenly over that square yard, and then just watch. Within about 5 to 10 minutes, if grubs are present in that section, the soap solution irritates their skin and disrupts the surface tension of the moisture around their bodies, and they'll start pushing up toward the surface trying to escape it. You'll see small white or cream-colored C-shaped larvae wriggling up out of the grass. Count how many show up in that 1 square yard. This is the exact same drench test university extension offices have recommended for decades. Because it's cheap, it's accurate, and it doesn't require digging up your entire lawn with a shovel to get an answer. The threshold that actually matters is 5 to 7 grubs per square foot. Since you tested a full square yard, which is 9 square feet, multiply what you count by roughly 1/9 to get your per square foot number. Or just remember that under about 45 to 60 grubs in that 1 square yard test patch, you're looking at a population your lawn can tolerate without real damage. Healthy, well-rooted turf can actually support a light grub population without you ever noticing a thing, because the root system outgrows the damage. Cross that threshold, and you're looking at thinning, yellowing, and eventually turf that lifts up like a loose carpet because there's nothing left holding it to the soil. Now here's where I have to be straight with you about what this dish soap trick actually is and isn't, because there's a version of this floating around the internet that oversells it hard. The soap solution is primarily a detection tool. It brings grubs to the surface so you can see them and count them. And yes, a percentage of the grubs that come up during that drench do end up dying from the soap disrupting their respiration and drying them out once they're exposed on the surface. For a small, isolated hotspot, a soap drench repeated over a few days can meaningfully knock back a light localized population, and that's the $4 trick doing real work for basically nothing. But if your test comes back with grubs boiling up out of the grass by the dozen across your whole yard, you are not going to solve a full lawn infestation by walking around with a watering can full of dish soap for a week. That's not the soap failing you, that's just math. A watering can covers a few square yards at a time. A real infestation covers thousands of square feet, and dish soap breaks down and washes through the soil profile fast, so it never builds the kind of residual protection an actual insecticide provides. Quick, before we get into what to do about a real infestation, if you're serious about fixing your lawn without wasting money guessing at products all summer, you need the right plan laid out for you. That's why I wrote the book. A straight step-by-step blueprint to a greener lawn with fewer weeds, exactly what to buy, where to get it, and when to put it down. Scan the QR code or click the link below to grab your copy. So let's talk about what actually handles a real infestation, because this is where the math against the Scott's product gets almost embarrassing. Scott's GrubX runs about $42 at Home Depot and covers 5,000 square feet. Flip the bag over and look at the active ingredient, chlorantraniliprole at 0.08%. That patent expired years ago, and generic versions of that exact same molecule have been sitting on agricultural supply shelves ever since at a fraction of the price. The generic concentrate runs about $60 to $80, but it covers 25,000 square feet at 2.5 times the concentration, which works out to roughly a quarter of a cent per square foot compared to close to a full cent per square foot for the Scott's bag. That's 4 to 5 times cheaper for a stronger product, and chlorantraniliprole has a 4-month residual in the soil, meaning one application in late June carries your lawn straight through October without a second pass. Scott's wants you buying that bag every spring and again in August. The molecule itself doesn't need it, the marketing calendar does. Application is straightforward. Broadcast spreader set to the label rate. Walk it in one direction and then a perpendicular pass to make sure you don't miss strips, and water it in within 24 hours so the product moves down into the root zone, where the grubs are actually feeding, not sitting on top of dry grass blades doing nothing. There's a second tool worth knowing about if you'd rather not put a synthetic insecticide down at all, and it's almost as cheap as the dish soap trick while giving you actual season-long protection instead of a one-time knockdown. Beneficial nematodes are microscopic worms, completely invisible to the eye, that you mix into water and apply with a regular hose end sprayer. Once they're in the soil, they actively hunt down grub larvae, enter their bodies, and release a bacteria that kills the grub from the inside within a couple of days. They only target soil-dwelling pest insects. They're completely harmless to pets, kids, earthworms, and beneficial insects. And a single application from a garden center or ordered online runs somewhere around $20 to $30 for enough to treat a standard yard. The catch with nematodes is timing and moisture. They need to go down while soil temperatures are warm, generally above 60 degrees, and the lawn needs to stay consistently moist for about 2 weeks after application so the nematodes can move through the soil and find their targets. Otherwise, they dry out and die before they ever reach a grub. If you're already running a regular watering schedule, this is close to a set-it-and-forget-it option, and it's the closest thing to a true low-toxicity long-term fix that actually exists for grub control, as opposed to the dish soap trick, which is a great diagnostic tool and a decent spot treatment, but was never designed to be a whole yard solution. Let me walk you through exactly what this looks like day by day, once you've identified a real problem and put down a proper treatment. Because knowing the timeline keeps you from panicking and reapplying too soon, which is a mistake I see constantly. Day 1, you run the soap drench test, confirm you're over threshold, and apply either the generic chlorantraniliprole or the nematode solution the same day, watering it in immediately. Days 1 through 3, nothing visible happens above ground, and that's completely normal. The product is moving down into the root zone, or the nematodes are dispersing through the soil looking for hosts. Days 4 through 7 for the chemical route. Grub feeding activity starts dropping off noticeably as the insecticide takes effect on any grub that ingests treated root tissue. For the nematode route, this window is when the nematodes are actively infecting whatever grubs they've located. Though full population knockdown from nematodes generally takes a bit longer than the chemical option, closer to 2 to 3 weeks for complete effect. Days 10 through 14. If you had any soft, spongy turf from grub feeding, you should start noticing the ground firming back up as root damage stops accumulating and the existing root system starts to recover. By day 21 to 30, most homeowners report the lawn visibly thickening back in over previously soft areas, assuming you kept up with normal watering and didn't compound the problem with drought stress on top of the grub damage. If you don't see that firming up trend by around the 3-week mark, that's your signal to retest with the soap drench in a couple of different spots, because either the application missed coverage in certain sections or, in rare cases with heavy infestations, a second pass is genuinely warranted. Before you even run the soap test, there's a mistake I see constantly that wastes people's whole weekend, and that's assuming every brown patch is a grub problem when a lot of the time it's something else entirely wearing the exact same disguise. Drought stress, chinch bug damage, and grub damage all produce the same basic symptom, a section of lawn going thin and brown. And homeowners guess wrong more often than you'd think. Here's the fast way to tell them apart before you spend a dime on any treatment. Grab a patch of the brown grass and give it a firm tug. If it lifts away in your hand like a loose piece of carpet with almost no roots holding it down, that's the signature of grub damage because the grubs have been eating through the root system just below the surface, and there's nothing left anchoring the turf to the soil. Drought-stressed grass. even when it looks just as brown, still has intact roots underneath and won't pull up that easily. It'll resist and tear rather than lift in a sheet. Chinch bug damage tends to show up first along hot, sunny edges like sidewalks and driveways rather than spreading evenly across open lawn. And pulling up the grass there won't give you that same rootless carpet feeling. Get this diagnosis right before you buy anything, because I've watched homeowners dump a full bag of grub killer on a lawn that was actually just thirsty, which does nothing for the drought problem and wastes $40 in the process. There's also a longer-term piece of this that most people never connect to their grub problem, and it's worth mentioning because it changes how much you'll need to rely on any treatment at all going forward. A lawn with deep, well-established roots simply tolerates grub feeding better than a lawn with shallow roots. For the same reason a tree with a wide root system survives losing a few roots while a young sapling doesn't. Mowing height plays a bigger role in this than almost anyone realizes. Cutting your grass at 2 inches because it looks tidy keeps the plant's root system shallow, since roots generally only grow about as deep as the portion of the blade you're leaving standing allows for through photosynthesis. Raise your mower deck to 3.5 or 4 inches for cool season grass, and you're not just shading the soil and suppressing weeds, you're encouraging a root system that can lose a meaningful percentage of its mass to grub feeding and still keep the plant alive and green. That's the real reason 2 identical yards side by side with similar grub counts can have completely different outcomes by August. One of them was mowed short all summer and collapses the moment grub pressure crosses the threshold. The other was mowed tall, built a deep root reserve, and shrugs off the same grub population without you ever noticing a problem above ground. So while the soap drench and the nematodes handle the immediate pest, raising your mower deck this week is the free permanent move that makes every future grub season less of a fight. I want to be honest about why the soap trick isn't something you hear about from the big lawn care brands. And it's not some grand conspiracy, it's just incentives. There's no product to sell for a tablespoon of dish soap you already own. A pest control company can't build a subscription plan around a watering can test that costs you nothing and takes 10 minutes. The entire retail model around lawn pests is built on selling you a treatment, ideally a recurring one, and a free diagnostic tool that might tell you your lawn is actually fine doesn't fit into that model at all. That's also exactly why so many homeowners apply a full bag of grub killer every single year whether they need it or not, because nobody ever told them there was a free way to check first. Skipping an unnecessary application isn't just saving money, it's also one less synthetic pesticide going into your soil and eventually into the storm drain that feeds your local watershed. So there's a real upside beyond your wallet here. One more thing worth knowing before you commit to either treatment path, because it changes how you store and handle whichever one you buy. Beneficial nematodes are living organisms, and that changes everything about how you treat the product once it's in your hands. They typically ship in a refrigerated sponge or gel carrier, and they need to go into the ground within a day or two of arrival, or get held in the refrigerator, never the freezer, until you're ready to apply them. Leave a nematode package sitting in a hot garage for a weekend, and you've bought a dead product before you ever mixed it into the sprayer. The generic chlorantraniliprole concentrate has none of these restrictions. It's a stable chemical that sits fine on a shelf for years, as long as the container stays sealed, which is part of why it's the more forgiving option if your schedule is unpredictable or you're not ready to apply the same day you buy it. Neither option is automatically the better choice. It really comes down to whether you can commit to same-day or next-day application and 2 weeks of consistent watering afterward. If your summer schedule is chaotic, buy the chemical concentrate and keep it on the shelf until you have a free Saturday. If you're already watering on a reliable schedule and you'd rather avoid a synthetic insecticide entirely, order the nematodes but plan the delivery for a week you know you'll be home to get them in the ground right away. Here's your plan for this weekend. Grab a bottle of plain dish soap you probably already have under the sink. Mix 2 tablespoons into 2 gallons of water and run the drench test in 2 or 3 different spots around your yard, prioritizing any area that feels soft or spongy underfoot or where you've noticed animal digging at night. Count what comes up in each spot. If you're under the threshold everywhere you test, you're done. No purchase necessary. Just recheck again in a few weeks since grub populations can shift through the season. If you're over threshold in a small, isolated patch, repeat the soap drench there over 2 or 3 consecutive days as a direct treatment and watch it clear up. If you're over threshold across multiple spots or your whole yard, that's when you make the call between the generic chlorantraniliprole concentrate for a fast 4-month knockdown, or beneficial nematodes if you want to stay away from synthetic insecticides entirely and you're already watering consistently enough to support them. Either way, water whatever you apply in within 24 hours, and mark your calendar for a follow-up soap test in about 3 weeks to confirm it worked instead of just assuming it did. That's the whole grub protocol, and for most yards this summer, it cost you $4.10 instead of $42 and a guess. Thanks a lot for watching, and let me know in the comments how many grubs showed up when you ran the test in your own yard. Now, if you're serious about fixing your lawn without wasting more money guessing at products all season, you need the right equipment and a plan. My book appearing on your screen right now is a straight step-by-step blueprint to a greener lawn with fewer weeds. Exactly what to buy, where to get it, and when to put it down. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your copy, or head over to fixyourlawnin30days.com to get the lawn you deserve. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.